Please join me in welcoming our panelists. First, I would like to have Ren Brown come forward. She's a licensed professional counselor and a primary therapist at Hopeway. Kate Weaver, she's the executive director at NAMI, the National Alliance of Mental Illness. Carter Cook, Colson Streitmatter, forgive me for stepping on your name. They are from the film Strength and Weakness. Catalina Kolzar, she is the director of Daisy. Vicky Topaz, the director of By My Side, and Emilio Gallegos, who is the subject, and Samson. I'm going to introduce you to our moderator, Dr. Shar'Dane Smith. She's a licensed clinical mental health counselor. She owns a counseling and consulting practice called Divine Reflection and Services. She is also the Associate Director for Outreach and Community Engagement at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. So let's give them a round of applause.
How are y'all doing? Good, okay. It's Saturday, and to Robbie's point, I'm definitely in my feelings a lot. These films were very powerful and just very excited to share space with you all today, as well as these filmmakers, as well as personal stories that were captured. And so we just want to have a conversation about mental health. That is the basis of this screening today, is to talk about mental health, but also to destigmatize it, because as was captured in several of the films, it's something that we all experience. And so just wanting to have an open conversation about that. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. And make sure you turn on your microphones. Thank you.
Hello. Oh yeah, I can do a mic check if that is okay. Good? All right, awesome. So what I would like to do is start with our mental health professionals, just to set the tone for the space and to talk more about mental health broadly. And so we'll start with Ren. Can you tell us about what you do as a therapist? Like, what does that actually look like, and what does mental health mean to you?
Sure. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. Yes, so I am a primary therapist at Hopeway. We are a mental health facility. We offer a variety of levels of care. And in general, what my day-to-day kind of looks like is a mix of individual therapy. One of my specialties in particular is trauma therapy, and so whenever I'm working with individuals, some of the things that you all saw on here is ultimately my primary focus. And then it also looks at group therapy as well, which is one of the things that was standing out to me both in my work and also in these beautiful films that we saw, was the importance and significance of connection, right? Whether that be with other human beings or an animal, right? The power that connection with other people, other beings has on a person's experience, on their mental health journey and their well-being is so powerful and can't be overlooked. So whenever we think about mental health, that's one of the things that often comes to mind, is our ability and the accessibility to be able to connect with other people, and to have those spaces and services available for us to be able to do that. So again, I'm happy to be able to be here and talk a little bit more in terms of the mental health side of things, and kind of what that looks like, and how we kind of go about helping folks in their journey of mental well-being. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. Wait, take the mic back. I have a quick follow-up.
Yes.
Because you mentioned connection, and I definitely want to touch on that. You all captured that so well. And just how connection helps us in our mental health and wellness, because I don't think we talk enough about social wellness and that being a component to our mental health. But Ren, I also did a little research before I got here, and I noticed that you do a lot related to mind-body connection.
Yeah.
So can you speak to that aspect, in the sense that a lot of us will feel things going on before we really recognize what's happening with us?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to try not to nerd out too much on you all, because this is definitely something that I feel really passionate about. In my own personal approach to therapy, that is really the highlight that I take, right, is that mind-body approach. Really understanding how these experiences that we've gone through impact us on all of these different levels, right? Which is why whenever we're focusing on providing services for folks who struggle with mental health related issues, especially as it relates to trauma and PTSD, we are taking a holistic approach to that care. We're able to understand that it's not just one single experience, one single aspect of well-being that impacts us. It's how they all relate to each other. So we can't just look at physical health. We also have to look at our social health, right? We have to also look at our emotional well-being. And again, part of that process looks at what access to resources do we have. Because whenever we're lacking in one element and one dimension of wellness, it has a significant impact on all of the other dimensions of wellness as well. So whenever we see isolation, right, whenever we see folks who withdraw as a result of their struggles of mental illness, that's one of the ways that we can understand how connection is so important. That whenever we are declining in our mental well-being, that connection, what we notice is that it starts to decline. So this ability to be able to provide opportunities for connection is such an integral part to that healing process. So whenever we're looking at wellness, again, it's not just focusing on one specific dimension, but really understanding how all of these different dimensions impact each other.
Yes, yes. And so what Ren is also speaking to is what I like to think of as holistic wellness, and a lot of research showing that taking care of our whole selves is important. And you mentioned access and accessibility, and so I want to switch to Kate for just a little bit. And so Kate, with you being the executive director of NAMI, what have you learned as far as how the community and access to care can promote mental health, especially among communities where there's still such a heavy stigma around mental health?
Thank you, and thanks for allowing me to be here. I'm honored to be able to speak to you all. NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and we are the oldest and largest nonprofit dedicated to helping people affected by mental illness. And quite frankly, we're all affected by mental illness. So we are here to serve the entire community. And we offer support groups, we offer classes, presentations in the community, but the most important thing, I think, is connection. So every time we get people together, whether it's for a support group or a meeting, we go deep fast. We don't talk about the weather. We talk about the things that are important, that the shared experience of having mental health issues in our families and with ourselves. And I also want to thank the Independent Picture House, because the art of film is so powerful. And I'm now congested because I was crying for most of the floor. Colson, I totally identify with your mom. We've had a similar experience in our family, and I appreciate your courage and vulnerability coming forward. That's powerful.
Yes.
I'm a swimmer, and I know the power of swimming and appreciate that. I've had experience with suicidal ideation in my family, so that film was also very powerful. And finally, I'm obsessed with dogs. We have 3 at home, and I believe in the incredible power of healing with dogs. And I don't even know if I answered your question, but.
You did, and you did a great job of really illustrating how we have more in common than what we think.
Yes.
And just by taking the time to have conversations, whether it starts over film, over sports, how your day's doing, you find that there's a lot of touch points with the people that you share space with. And so thank you for doing that, Kate. I appreciate it. But while you're also speaking, I noticed that you used to be a photographer professionally. I did a little bit of stalking, y'all, just to make sure I knew the people who were up here. And so can you speak to the power of photography and film? And you specifically talked about how you used to like to capture the light that was in everyone else. And so we saw the light in all of these beautiful films, but could you speak to that aspect too?
Sure. So I had a portrait photography business here in Charlotte for 20 years, and my favorite part of my job was connection. I realized when people would call me to photograph a building, I would be, absolutely not, that sounds terribly boring, but give me a family, give me a senior in high school, and I was in heaven. But then during the pandemic, of course, things dissipated, and in 2021, I decided it was time to close my business of 20 years and instead shine the light on mental health. And so I started by volunteering with NAMI, and at the time, there wasn't a lot of programming happening because of the pandemic. So we've spent the last couple of years building up all of these in-person programs and allowing people to share their light with each other. And so now I'm the executive director, first one in the 30-year history of NAMI, starting in February, which I didn't expect or plan for another career, but I'm totally here for it.
Yeah, woo-hoo, congratulations. Okay, so to our first film, Strength and Weakness, Colson, Carter, amazing. Truly amazing. I felt the level of vulnerability through the screen, and I think it takes a lot of strength to be able to do that on such a public platform. And so, Colson, my first question really is for you. And what made you want to tell your story via film?
This guy right here
Okay.
is the answer. I think we met through a class in our various educational journeys. And Carter and I initially connected on the topic of our class, which was sports. And that sort of gradually evolved into conversations about life and what really mattered, and led to us having sort of a certain level of vulnerable conversations ourselves about mental health in class. And then when it came time to the way that our program is structured, we had to partner up for a thesis film at the end of our graduate degree. And Carter was the one who said, you know, what if we tell your story together, since it's so powerful to both of us. And so it was always on my heart to share it with others. And then Carter's idea was to bring it to film like this.
Awesome, thank you, thank you. And Carter, can you speak to more of what you do and how you are able to connect with students like Colson in a way to help empower them to share their stories?
Yeah, I have a day job as a lawyer, which is has its own mental health issues. I was working at the time. I was one of the in-house attorneys at Wake Forest University, which is where I'd gone to school, and I was looking for a mental health outlet of my own, and somewhere at the intersection of an employee benefit and a New Year's resolution, I decided to start taking classes in the graduate school in the documentary film program. And it was a sports media and storytelling program, and it was really re-energizing just to get back. I was never crazy about being in school, but to be surrounded by younger folks like Colson, who they didn't call me Mr. Cook, which was a great relief. And, just get to know some of these folks and be able to find new ways to share stories and use a different part of my brain. And it was really probably, aside from meeting my wife, it's probably the best thing I did at Wake Forest.
Wow. No, that's awesome, and I think it speaks to the aspect of mentorship as well, which comes up a lot in sports as well as in community, and just having one person see the value in your story, having one person see the light in you and encouraging you to shine bright. And so I'm very happy as well that you met Colson and that y'all were able to produce this wonderful film. And I want to shift back to you again, Colson, because you really talked a lot about family dynamics, whether you realize it or not. And so I am curious as to what you think would be helpful for parents to know in interacting with their children, just in general, but especially when dealing with various challenges.
That's a great question. I'll have to phone my mom on the way home and give her my answer. I think the thing that I've learned the most is just like your kids are always listening when you say you love them. And even if in the moment, the times where my parents were desperately trying to convince me that I was worth something, even in the moment that I might not have given them any impression that I was listening or that I was processing it, I think I held onto those words sort of in my lowest points that, even if I thought there was nobody on earth that was calling me enough or was saying that I was worthy, there was somebody who believed that, whether they were wrong or not, in my mind. Like there was somebody that felt that way, and so I think the advice is, they're always listening and never give up.
Yeah, and that's something we definitely saw from your mom, from you, from your family, and the system that you had around you was just to never give up and to keep going. And so I really appreciate you for just, again, empowering us all through your story. Like, very powerful, so thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Is it Catalina?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Wonderful. Daisy, wow. Wow, 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 wow. I think one of the things that was really beautiful was to see the element of nature and how that can be very grounding for us, to be involved with the world around us as well as people around us. And all of your films, again, touched on connection, right? And so Catalina, for you, I want to ask first, how do you feel like this film, if it did, helped you in processing grief and processing the loss of your mother?
Great question. First of all, thank you, Rodney, for inviting Daisy to come to its hometown screening. I lived here for 12 years before moving to New York. And in the audience are people who I've known for a very long time, people that I worked with in some capacity, and you're all my Charlotte family, in essence, people that I swam with. So yeah, I just want to start with an acknowledgement and gratitude for being here. I got in this morning, I'm flying home tomorrow morning. I think Daisy is part of a never-ending journey to heal. I don't think we ever heal or recover from such a loss. The best graphic that I ever saw, the best comic was, grief becomes this little black ball on your shoulder, and rather than weighing you down, you just get used to it and you grow stronger, but it's always there. So it's cathartic, absolutely. It made me discover a lot of things. It made me question a lot of things. And in the past, when I have suffered loss, art has been my savior. I make art in loss. So this was a natural step for me to make a film.
Yeah, and it seemed like you had been capturing life's moments throughout your life, which is awesome because I barely can get a selfie together. And so I think that that's beautiful as well, but also I think one of the things that grounds us is being able to find those touch points of joy, those touch points that allow us to make meaning out of the things that we're experiencing, like our artwork, like music, like film, like swimming, all of the things that were named. But I was thinking as I was watching this film that Mother's Day is tomorrow, and your mom as well. And through talking about the journey of your mom, I am curious as to if there was anything highlighted about the importance of prioritizing wellness for mothers, because you mentioned that your mom was someone who cared a lot for others and went out of her way to be able to help others. So what do you think is kind of a message that you have or something that you've learned about the importance of prioritizing your wellness even when you're caring for so many other people?
Yeah. I've learned in this process that you, the self, are number one. And if you can't function, if you are not well, you can't be there for others. So I'm very vocal about needing my time. My swimming is my time, running is my time. Shutting the door to my bedroom and having Juan Miguel and Pia in another room is my time. I'm very, very aware.
Yeah, great answer. Oh.
The other thing that I was going to say to your comment was, unbeknownst to me, I was 13 when I started making Daisy.
Wow. Wow.
With that camcorder footage in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You've been telling your story for a long time.
I've been a visual storyteller since I had my first camera. It was a little Pentax 35 millimeter as a 12 or 11-year-old girl. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
That is.
Like just sitting with that 13 to now. And one of the things that you mentioned that I want to highlight, I tell people that I work with all the time, the roles that you have, moms, dads, friend, co-worker, those are just your roles, but that's not necessarily all of who you are. And if you don't take care of who you are, which makes you and gives you capacity to do those things and to show up in the way that you want to, then you're not going to be your full self. And so I love how you describe that in terms of making sure that you have space and time for you, because we all need that. That's something that doesn't have to be earned, but something that we all deserve to experience. And so transitioning to our next film, so happy to have y'all here. Y'all are such a grounding presence on this end, like very chill energy, which I appreciate. And so thank you both for participating and for allowing us to see your film. And can we share a few mics down this end for Vicky and Emilio. Awesome, awesome. So Vicky, can you start by just telling us a little bit more about you and how you got into film?
Sure. For many years I've been a photographer, and several years ago I became aware of post-traumatic stress, service animals, and veterans, and I realized that I did not know any veterans from current wars. And I was really drawn to having that become my next project, and I ended up meeting Mary, who you saw in the film, and her Operation Freedom Paws, and she was training veterans to partner with their dogs, their service dogs. And so I was photographing them for quite a while, for a few years, and I began to meet the children and the spouses of the veterans, and I realized that I really didn't have an understanding of the challenges that they faced. And at the same time, a little further on, I realized, knowing those children and listening to them during the interviews, I was telling my own story, because my father had been in World War II. He was a tail gunner. He made it home. But I now know from this film that he had terrible PTSD. He had terrible problem with alcohol, with anger. And so this was a big gift to me, to have this realization. But at the same time, to tell their stories and to know them even more than I already did, it was so gratifying and so fulfilling. And to be at a venue like this, it really fulfills some of the objectives that we have for the film. And for Emilio and Samson to be here and talk about it is, it just takes things to another level. And we are so thrilled to be here.
Yeah, no, we're excited to have you both here, and you talked a lot about awareness, which I think is something that is very powerful about your film, in the sense that it highlights things that most people don't know, and PTSD often being categorized as more of invisible at different times. And so I know for me, coming from a military family and having parents in the military, that yes, your biggest goal, your biggest prayer is for your loved ones to come home. But what people don't talk about is what happens when you get home, and the next part of the test being able to survive and thrive again once you're here. And so I'm very grateful that you were able to connect and capture the story. And Emilio, we're grateful that you're here too. I see all the Cali love at the San Fran, so definitely appreciate you being in the space today. And so what I want to start with you is, what made you open up your home, your family, to such a personal story, because it was not only yours but theirs too. So what made you decide that you wanted to work with Vicky and allow her to be able to capture this?
Thank you. I appreciate the question, and again, we appreciate being here. It's such a pleasure. I think it was just the opportunity to converse more about what was going on with us. I had no idea where it was going to go, what it was going to lead to. As far as it's been a healing process, very cathartic. It's still a healing process for my children and I. It's opened up avenues of conversation that we may not have had. The first time I heard my daughter say I was really scared of my dad was when this film kind of got finished up about a couple of years ago, 5 years in making, but that's 13, 12 years of us existing without me knowing, like, she was really, really scared of me, It's continually healing. It's still healing, even though we're in this stage of it now, because I was recently an artist in residence in Berkeley, California at a art institute called Kala, and my proposition there was to write 3 different chapbooks, which are smaller poetry books. I'm a poet, I'm a writer, to my daughter, to my son, to my grandson, who is 10 months old now. But Vicky gave me the audio from my kids' interviews, about an hour long each. About 4 years ago, I asked for it. Never listened to it, just because I never had. So last month I sat with it with a lot of intention to write to them. And so the film is still healing us, because the first time I heard more words than what we saw here was last month. And so my recent work has been conversing with them, answering what they said through the interviews. And so again, it's just been really healing, not only for myself and us, but also my family. you know, the friends of the family, my friends, the friends of my children, you know, maybe understand them no more now because of what they've been going through. So it's just like you said, and someone else says, the ripple effect is like, you can't ever say where it's gonna end. And that's really what we wanna be, just a conduit to like the next conversation. And you said something earlier, I talk about all the time, I do a lot of public speaking, that we have more in common at the end of the day than differences. So like my poetry, this, if we're not a veteran, we are mother, father. At the end of the day, on the basic human level of experience, we can come together on emotions. And that's what I really, really appreciate about the arts and everything and being here. And so thank you again for everyone.
Yes, beautifully stated. And I think you also touched on how when we say yes to our healing, we also unlock the ability for others around us to heal, including our family, our friends, those who are on the journey with us. And so very powerful. And the next question I have for you is, what advice would you have for veterans who are transitioning after deployment or out of the service? What would you say to them or to their families as they are making that transition back home?
It took me a while to go through a lot of unsuccessful coping mechanisms, drinking until the pain in my chest went away, working out until it went away. You know, it took me going through different therapies. You know, I was taking lorazepam for a while, half my eyebrow disappeared. So a lot of unsuccessful coping mechanisms until exposure therapy at the VA led me into writing. And I grew up as a painting and drawing artist, so I went back to school to study writing more. English literature, I say, really, really saved my life at that time because it gave me something to cling on to instead of drinking or working out. And then I went for my undergrad, my MFA. And so I would say to recognize your experience. Someone told me something early in my therapy at the VA because she asked me, why don't I feel like I deserve what I'm getting? You know, I have a scar and all this stuff, but like I flew home from Iraq to Kuwait to Germany, back home with a gentleman I could see across the plane, and he came on with his own in-flight surgeon, IV. He had half an arm. He was kind of burned up. And so one day in therapy, I told her, I don't really think I deserve this because like I wasn't that. I'm not that. And I pointed to the gentleman who I saw on the white wall, and she told me like your story deserves validation, regardless of how great or how less it is of anything. And so I think we all deserve, and I use that word validation a lot. I've spoken in like writing circles, and I never wanted to be like validate how great I am because I'm not great at all, but just to validate, like put a finger on like, oh, that did happen, and where can we go from here? So I think having this avenue of communication, admitting, you know, talking to your family, talking to your children, saying like, not hiding, not running from it. Like I was very much, if anybody has ever read The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde, like he's one man in the city, one man in the country, and like I didn't drink in front of my kids for maybe until 2016, the first time I drank in front of them. But I had a very different life in front of them and away from them, and so I would just say that if you want to be the best you can be and successful, however you're going to find success in your life, family, friend, you need to be vulnerable, you need to be real, and to really tell the people that love you who the real you is. You know, because if not, how can they help you if you're not willing to tell them how to help you? If I want you to love me, I need to tell you how to love me the best. The best way I can do that is to like say, this is who I am, and where do we go from here? You know?
Yes, no, I'm here for the snaps. All the things you are out here giving us a nice little encouragement, but also one of the things that you mentioned that I think is really helpful is we have a tendency to minimize our experiences if we don't think they are of significance like someone else's. And so I'm really happy that you've been in a space to where you can validate your experiences as your own and giving yourself the space to heal. So love that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so I've been able to ask a lot of questions. I don't want to be selfish. I want to give those of you in the audience a chance to ask one or two questions of our panelists. Is that still okay?
Yeah, no, that's okay. I don't want to give advice.
Okay, so if you have a question, just put your hand up and we can definitely make sure that's addressed.
Hi, yes, my question is for Emilio, actually. You mentioned prior to enlisting, you were very, I guess, tantalized by this image of the U.S. military as, you know, very exciting. You know, you get to do a lot of stuff, you get to be an active participant and being a hero for your country. I'm very curious if your perspective on that has changed after your experiences and this trauma, and whether or not you have conflicting feelings about enlisting now, especially with I noticed you had a shirt on in the film that said, like, decolonization, and I'm just curious as to where your feelings lie on that currently, because that's very interesting to me.
I appreciate that question. After the fact of going to Iraq, it's hard to validate a lot of things in that whole process, but in the moment, like, we live for our brothers every day. Coming home, there's films made about it, but you come home and there's like 200 cereals in the aisle. Like, what do I choose? I don't know. But in Iraq, like, I just had to wake up, eat, maybe, make sure my friends don't die. Like, I wore the same thing every day. So all these decisions you make are cut away, and there's like 3 things you got to do every day. And once all these decision-making opportunities are taken away, you can really concentrate on what matters. And so, despite the fact that we couldn't really control the bigger aspect of things, I can control what happened to these 10 guys today until we get home. So you kind of pull back into what can, because I can drive myself crazy thinking about the bigger aspect of everything, right? But at the end of the day, I believe in every pluses and minuses of everything, I drove over an IED September 5th, 2008. Sure, very crazy, a lot of good and bad things. My children have suffered from it, but there's other benefits to it, like, sure, educational benefits, sure, monetary gain, but maybe I wouldn't have a service dog because of that experience. If I didn't have it, maybe I wouldn't be here. Maybe my children and I wouldn't have this avenue of conversation if this whole thing needed to happen, right? So, as much as I can look at it and say we shouldn't have been there doing this and that. It's not going to change what I am today. So, like, what can we do about it now? But I appreciate your question, and it does, conversations need to happen. You don't need to be so on one track minded about things and looking at the greater picture. I could determine what happens to my buddies, and now I can determine what happened to my family, and I'm really focused on that.
Go ahead.
Hey, how are you? Thank you, everyone, for putting yourself out there. I can't help but notice, and I certainly have been a consumer of the mental health industry for sure, but I can't help but notice that we're always kind of in a reactive position as the people who are either trying to heal or trying to help others heal. And is there a point somewhere, and I don't know who to ask the question to, maybe to everyone, is there a point at some place where we start pushing back against these things, these forces, these mechanisms, these whatever we want to call them, that put us in these positions, like in with these moral injuries that come from living in poverty, or from the military, or even the historical context for your mom, who was probably carrying a whole bunch of stuff. Like, how do we fight back? How do we push back? How do we really address these huge mechanisms that are putting us in these positions? That's my question.
I would love to hear from you all in terms of like your individual experiences, what that looked like for you. I can speak as, again, someone who specializes in trauma therapy. One of the biggest components of trauma that I have recognized is how disorienting and disconnecting those experiences are. In the sense of, I believe it was in the last film, one of the kind of ideas that was really emphasized and highlighted was presence, right? Being able to be connected to that present moment. And whenever we have these really traumatic experiences, these experiences that are highly emotionally charged and stressful, what it does is it really disorients our ability to separate from here and now to then, right? So a lot of the times, whenever you're talking about that kind of reactivity, right, it's because we're living in that trauma time. We're living in that moment where we experience that wound. And so a part of the healing process is really being able to connect back to that present moment. And what that looks like is being able not only to connect to yourself, to Catalina's point, but also the ability to connect to other people around you, and your ability to connect to your environment, right, the greater world. So it's a long journey, right? And it's an ongoing journey too. It's not one that really ever ends, because we are continuously going to be faced with different life stressors, different things that impact us in all of these different ways. And so we are constantly arriving to these different experiences. But we're also always on this journey of reconnecting back to ourselves and reconnecting back to this present moment experience. But yeah, to that point, I would love to hear what your all's individual experiences have kind of looked like.
Well, I was trying to formulate my thoughts. One of the things that, I don't know how much you work with this, but intergenerational trauma is something that is proven, it exists, it is trauma that you carry from previous generations. And one of the things that I have made a humongous effort to do is to break the intergenerational trauma in my family, and I can say that in my lineage, I am doing it. I've been doing this EMDR therapy. I started in January. EMDR it stands for Eye Movement Desensitization Reprogramming. It's not that anymore, but it's the idea of shutting down your thinking right brain and left brain. And your traumas are stored in your amygdala. And this is a way of reliving one particular trauma that is associated with a category, say medical trauma or death. And in a way, I can say now, I'm not the same person I was in December. One of the traumas, one of the areas that I worked on is catastrophizing. I've been living in a fight mode my entire life, unbeknownst to me. And I no longer think in that way. There's been several aspects through this therapy that have quite literally, the therapy rewires your brain. You get rid of these core beliefs that you've grown up with that are not right, that are not the truth. And that to me it has literally changed my brain and how I react and how I think, how I speak to my loved ones, and it's a game changer. EMDR therapy. It's something that can be done virtually. You might have heard of it as tapping as well, but I do it in person, and you have two little, they look like eggs, and they vibrate, and the therapist controls the frequency and the intensity, and you relive one trauma from, if you start on a scale of 1 to 10, you go from 10 to hopefully a 1, and it works. It's mind-blowing. It's science. Yeah.
I just, the question about reacting, that really hits home for me. So much of my inspiration for doing this, unfortunately, is a reaction. My wife's youngest sister died by suicide when she was 29 years old. And Kevin Love's anxiety attack, where you see him on the court against the Hawks, where he's just crouching down, and he was 29. And when I was taking these classes, it all kind of connected, and my reaction to Alice's death, I can't get in front of her. We had no idea that was in the realm of possible outcomes in her life. But once that happened in 2010, we're not going to not talk about our feelings, and everybody kind of been go along and get along, but we just wanted to make sure that our children knew they could talk to us or they could talk to somebody. And again, it's a reaction. It doesn't change what happened to my sister-in-law, but I hope it will allow my children to feel better in our house. And then the great blessing of being able to work with Colson is to be able to be with somebody who was willing to take an even bigger step and put himself out there and tell more people. I knew some of those guys he's in the picture with in Young Life, they were going to high school with my son. So we were interconnected, and I had heard about this guy, and everybody thought the world of him. I'm like, you got a great story, and you ought to get out. So again, we're just doing what we can to start talking on the front end.
I want to add one more thing to that, and I'm glad you said that. So NAMI has a program called Ending the Silence, and it is designed to do just that. There are 3 different 1-hour seminars. One is designed for middle and high school kids. One is designed for parents, and the third is for staff. And the seminar talks all about what's the difference between sadness and depression. What do you do if you feel that you're going to hurt yourself or your friend is? When do you break that confidence and go for help? Where to go for help? What happens when you call 911 versus 988? So we're hoping to arm the kids with this information before that gets to a crisis point, but also, and really importantly, is also educate the parents, because our hope is they go home after the seminar and they start talking about mental health at the dinner table. We want to make it normal for people to talk about their feelings. And I resonated with don't cry in public. We saw that in one of the films, and we have to be able to share our feelings with each other in order to support each other.
Yeah, y'all had wonderful responses to that question, and I think the films humanized us in a lot of ways that we don't give each other the grace sometimes to be imperfect. And so to piggyback off of what was already stated, I also think we are reactive in nature. And so proactively caring for ourselves can also be very impactful. So not just telling someone that you love them or you care about them because you feel like they're going through something, telling them that anyway. Making sure they know that they're seen, they're supported, they're valued, but also how you care for yourself. Not just wait until you get burnt out to start trying something new. Making that a part of your daily routine to care for you, all aspects of you, mentally, physically, emotionally, socially, making space to connect with others around us. And so I think these films did a great job of just highlighting some of those things. And so
I think we have one more question.
Okay, one more question. All right.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Independent Picture House, first of all, for this. Thank you for those who were the subjects of these documentaries or had loved ones who were subjects of these documentaries. And thank you to the filmmakers for your artistry and sharing your talents with us. Long story very short, I have a nonprofit who goes into mostly Title I schools. And our mission statement is empowering resiliency in students through creativity. And again, to make a long story short, yesterday I had a conversation with a young lady who is having lots and lots and lots of difficulties and didn't say it in so many words, but you could feel suicidal tendencies from what she was saying. And me not being a therapist myself and not wanting to trigger and certainly not trying to get on your side of the fence and feeling that any feedback I gave back came off as so many cliches and impotent and things like that. What I tried to resonate with her was, you have so many things. I have faith in you that you will do many wonderful things in your lifetime and help many people. But what would you suggest, either yourself, the therapist, or anybody else, when you get into those situations and you're not necessarily trained as a therapist to try to get a student past a brief moment in their life or days or weeks or months or whatever, what would your suggestion be as a layperson to try to get somebody through a very, very difficult time in their life?
Yeah, I mean, I first and foremost just want to acknowledge the heaviness of that question, right? There's a lot of weight that comes with it. And yeah, it can be a really scary situation to be in whenever you're not a trained therapist. Even when you are a trained therapist, I'll tell you that is not a fun conversation that I ever want to have. It's not anything that I enjoy being in. But one of the privileges that I have is that I've learned how I can show up in those spaces as opposed to, as you said, lay people and civilians. So what I would say in general, one of the most powerful tools that we have available to us is knowledge and awareness of, first and foremost, signs, warning signs of whenever people may be demonstrating symptoms of suicidal ideation. Being aware of the resources that are available both on a national level and on a local level is incredibly important so that you do have a tool that you can offer if available. But first and foremost, again, one of the biggest themes that we've been talking about in this panel is connection, right? And whenever individuals, oftentimes whenever it gets to a point where they are thinking about suicide, they're thinking about harming themselves, there's usually such a significant disconnection that has happened. And so one of the most powerful things that we can do is be present with another human being, right? I think to Emilio's point before, right, being able to just validate another person's experience. A lot of times people don't get that validation, and we might not ever know that they're not getting that validation. So the simple act of being able to be present with another human being has such a power that we can't overlook. So I wish I could give you all more of a clear and direct answer of say these exact words and everything will be okay. But unfortunately, a lot of that is outside of our direct power and our direct control. So what we can then focus on is what do we have the ability to do in those moments? And what we have the ability to do is to be a supportive and safe person. One of the things that's coming to mind is in Colson's film, right? Whenever you were highlighting how you and your friend had never really chatted about that before, but you both realized in that moment that you were safe people that you could share these feelings and experiences with, right? A lot of the times we feel so isolated and alone in our experience, and that can be the source of that disconnection because we feel like we're the only ones who have ever dealt with it. So that acknowledgement and that honoring of the experience and the person who is experiencing it can be so, so powerful and so significant and meaningful to that person. So thank you for that question. I'm wondering if anyone else has anything that they might want to offer.
I'll add something. We at NAMI, we do talk about this topic a lot, and we're all lay people at NAMI. We're no professionals. One thing we know is it's okay to say to someone, are you thinking about hurting yourself? You're not putting an idea in someone's head. It's already there. You're giving acknowledgement into the world by saying that. Secondly, asking someone if they have a plan. Oftentimes people can think about suicide, but it's just thinking. When someone has a plan and they can articulate that, that is a warning sign to get help immediately. When people are giving away their belongings, that's another big warning sign that it's a serious issue with that person, right? Is there anything else you would add for what someone can do to identify the severity of the situation?
Yeah, and to that point, I'm really glad that you brought that up whenever we're thinking about severity, because one of the things that we all, as long as you have some internet access, you will have availability to, is the mental health or the stress continuum, right? And that's a way for you to be able to look at these different levels and the different severity of our health and our wellness. And one of the things that highlights is what the experiences are typically like when we're in crisis, right? And so we'll see all of those different domains of health and well-being being affected, right? So in terms of our physical well-being, one of the things that we might notice is a difficulty in keeping up with our physical well-being, our hygiene, right? A lot of oversleeping, staying in bed for long periods of time. Your appetite is going to be disrupted. So you might notice some physical changes. Again, there's going to be some of those behavioral changes as well, where you might see some more of that isolation, more of that withdrawing. You might see more flat affect, right? Basically meaning that a person might appear kind of numb. But one of the biggest things that people don't always recognize are some of the more brighter things that can come with suicidal ideation, to your point about the kind of sentimentality, giving away of items, suddenly appearing brighter all of a sudden. Those are also aspects and signs that a person may be soon planning to make an attempt. So there's these different kind of categories or dimensions in which we are able to look out for specific signs and symptoms of suicidal ideation. But yes, absolutely, the giving away of items is one of the biggest signs that someone may be making an attempt. But really you want to start to look, to your point earlier about being reactive versus proactive, right? We really want to start intervening whenever we notice the symptoms before it ever even turns into suicidal ideation, right? So we want to be able to be aware and cognizant of how mental health issues impact us on all of these levels so that we can understand when it starts to escalate to the point of suicidality.
QPR. Take a QPR class. Take a QPR class.
QPR class, that's right. There are some classes available in Charlotte. QPR is one of them. It's free to the public, and it stands for
Question, persuade,
respond.
refer.
Question, Persuade, Refer.
And so Thank you all for your space. And so I know we had a couple of heavier questions, and I know these films captured the heavy side of mental health. But one thing that really resonated with me was the hope in all of your stories. Colson, being able to see you work through your journey, being married, Catalina, being able to see you with your family, as well as being grounded and free again in the water, and even for you, Emilio, with being able to reconnect and feel safe with your family, and also listening in the picture. And so I hope that you all take that away as well, as there is a lot of hope, even in the moments that feel tough and challenging and dark, still reaching to hope and connect. And so I want us to give another round of applause for these panelists, for the filmmakers.
And let's give a round of applause for our moderator, Dr. Smith.